Hi, it's Laura from Readathon Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. I am here with a recap video where I want to share the books that I read for this year's BLACKATHON. For folks who are unfamiliar, BLACKATHON is a readathon that happens in February in honor of Black History Month and celebrating works by Black authors in all genres. The readathon was started by and is run by Jesse at JesseOnYoutube, whose channel was up until recently known as Bowties&Books. And every year there are tons of great prompts to pick from. And in the years that I've participated, this being I think my third year, I've always found some great books. So I wanted to make a video sharing the 5 books that I read this year. So I'm going to link below Jesse's video where they explain the different prompts and teams for this year's readathon. And I'm also going to link below another video by Jesse, which is recommendations or suggested books for the prompts in the team that I chose. So 2 videos to go check out there. This year, the teams were based on different figures, with the overall kind of theme uniting all of those figures being the theme of warriors. So in past years there have been kind of genre-based teams. Last year I was very much into team sci-fi fantasy, but this year there were different prompts for, I think it was 3 teams based on 3 different figures all related to the theme of warriors. And the team that I chose is called Team Hatshepsut, named of course for the pharaoh. And so this team has a set of prompts inspired by Hatshepsut, 4 prompts, and then as a bonus there is the group book suggested for this team, which I did read. And I took the approach of picking a different book for each of the prompts. So I read 4 books, for the 4 prompts, and then the 5th book being the group book. I'm going to timestamp my video below based on the different prompts. I had a great reading month. I was reading right up until the very last day of February. I just got in, managed to get through my TBR for the readathon just in time, which I felt quite accomplished about that. I think I was fairly ambitious in terms of picking 5 books rather than doubling up the prompts, which is also totally allowed, So I'm excited to share these with you. I actually read all of these books as ebooks, so I don't have physical copies to hold up, but I do have some different books by some of the authors, so I can share those, since of the 5 authors that I read for the month, 3 of them are authors that I had already read before, and 2 of the authors are new to me, so I do have some other books that I can share. Okay, without further ado, the first prompt for the team that I participated in was to read a book of any genre by a trans-Black diasporic author. And the book that I picked for this was on my to-read list for a very long time by an author whose work I have read. I've read 3 of their books before, and that was The Death of Vivek Oji by Akoiki Emezi. And this was, I would say, probably as of now, as of filming this, and I'm filming late, it's March. As of filming this, I think that this is the best book that I've read in 2023. I was blown away by this book. So The Death of Vivek Oji is set in Nigeria in the 1980s and 1990s. And as the name of the book suggests, it centers around a character named Vivek Oji, who from the very beginning of the book, the reader knows dies, right? It's made clear from the very, very beginning, so that is not a spoiler. And it's a non-linear kind of narrative that kind of goes back and forth between Vivek's life and, the aftermath of Vivek's death, which you find out about, quite a ways into the book, right near the end. And Vivek is a gender nonconforming and queer character, you could say, And the book follows Vivek and the people around Vivek, particularly relationships between Vivek and different family members, and different friends as well. And so it grapples with dealing with homophobia, dealing with, gender policing in various kinds of ways, and also with finding joy, and I found this book, I think in my review of this book I said that I found it to be hopeful and devastating. This book really affected me. I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about this book on and off since I finished it, and I think I will probably reread. I'm not a big rereader, but this book was really excellent and really affecting. And it's hard for me to say which of Akwaeke Emezi's books of the now 4 I've read that I thought was the best, or that I had the strongest, emotional reaction to, but definitely Vivek Oji is up there. So that is a book that I absolutely recommend. I'm at a loss of how to even describe my experience of this book, but it was absolutely incredible. The second prompt for my team, the team that I was on for BLACKATHON, is a book with a Black girl protagonist who is not afraid to be loud, confrontational, or take up space. And so I interpreted this prompt, in terms of having a protagonist who's a girl, and decided to do something that I don't do very often at all, really like never. And I read a middle grade book. And the book I read was A Benny's Song by P. Jelly Clark, who, if you've watched my book recaps before, is one of my absolute favorites. He is the author, among other things, of A Master of Jinn, The Haunting of Tramcar 015, many other books. I adore this book. He is a kind of insta-buy author for me. If he publishes something, I go out and I get it and I read it. And I've loved everything I've read by him. And I'll say something about him that really stands out to me is that he, in my view, writes really wonderful female protagonists, this book included. And this book has a queer woman as a protagonist, and is a character that I really appreciate, and I'm grateful for. I think that, I think probably most of his books have women at the center of the stories, and I really appreciate his portrayals of female characters. So when I saw that he had a middle grade debut coming out, I went ahead and requested the advanced copy, and the publisher and NetGalley were kind enough to approve my request, and I very happily read this middle grade debut. And A Benny's Song follows a young girl protagonist. It incorporates a lot of references to African mythology into the story, and it's an adventure story wherein this young girl, A Benny's, put in a position, I don't want to give away too much of the story, is put in a position where she needs to try to save her family and her village after it is attacked. And she, through the course of the story, she really comes into her own and learns about her own capabilities and faces fear and ends up kind of forming a team with this group of girls who are all very different from each other. Many of them are spirits, and animal spirits in particular. And these girls go on this adventure. And it's hard for me to review or really talk about a middle grade book because I don't really read them. So I don't know what the conventions of middle grade writing are like. But I quite enjoyed this book. I thought that it touched on some pretty heavy and serious themes in ways that felt to me reasonable for a middle grade audience. But again, that's as someone who doesn't read a lot of middle grade. I don't know, how those things tend to be handled. But I would say that A Benny Song was great. I think that I will end up buying this book when it comes out for a young reader or two in my life, particularly if you have a young reader in your life who would like a book with a group of girls, on an adventure with magic. I think that this would be, a great pick. So I really enjoyed A Benny Song for sure. And P. Jelly Clark continues to be, an instant read for me. So I was happy to find that book to read for this. The third prompt for our team was a book of any genre with impressive creative architecture or that is set largely in one building. And there were some examples given, like an office romance or a book set in a college or set in a hospital. Now, obviously, if you know my channel, you know that I will try to make it sci-fi fantasy if I can find a way. So when I read this prompt and thought, impressive architecture and a story set largely in one building, my mind immediately went, well, if it's set on a spaceship or a space station, it's probably going to only be set in one place, and I would find that impressive, so that's what I'm going to go for, if I can find it. And I found a debut novel, Breaking Day by Adam Oyebanji, and so this is what I chose, and this is a new author to me, and his debut novel. And this is a novel that follows a generational spaceship that has been traveling away from Earth for 6 to 7 generations, or kind of on generation 6 are the older folks on the ship, and generation 7 are the younger ones on the ship at the time of the story. The ship left Earth, Earth wasn't completely destroyed when it left, but there was a lot of political tumult. There was a lot of complicated dynamics related to artificial intelligence having kind of taken over, for lack of better explanation. And so this generational ship left towards a new planet that the people thereon would be living on. So the whole kind of cast of characters has never been on a planet. They've never been anywhere but this spaceship. And the title Breaking Day refers to a rapidly approaching day where the ship is going to have to put its brakes on to slow in its approach to this final destination planet. And this is a book that I think, I don't know if I would call this YA or adult. I feel like it has crossover appeal. The protagonists are, I think, like late teens in terms of age. The main character is studying to be an engineer on the ship. And, like many generational spaceship stories do, this is a book that certainly grapples with class. It grapples with ways in which, class positions between different families on this generational ship get really entrenched over time, and how that has created kind of prejudices against the main character, for example. And there's kind of a mystery as the core of the plot. And I really liked this book. I did think that a bit more moral complexity on the part of the characters might have been nice. Ravi, who's the main character, he's very like straightforwardly a likable, like definitely the good guy, no ambiguity about that. But I enjoyed his adventure, and I liked this book, and I would really like to check out more of Adam Oyebanji's work as well. I really like a generational spaceship as a setup for a book, so I enjoyed that. The fourth prompt is a book with lavishly wealthy characters or that explores class. And for this book, I chose the book The Faithless by C.L. Clarke, which is a sequel in the Magic of the Lost series. And I think I've talked about on this channel before having liked the first book in this series, which is called The Unbroken. So The Faithless is coming out very soon. I managed to score an advance copy, an ebook of The Faithless, and having really liked this, I was very excited to read it, and I was quite pleased, to be able to slot it so easily into one of the prompts. And The Faithless fits into the prompt of lavishly wealthy characters or exploring class, because this is a series, I think it's going to be a trilogy, I think it's planned to be a trilogy, that is a fantasy series, but it is set in this kind of fictional setting that is very, very clearly inspired by French colonial occupations in northern Africa, particularly Algeria, Tunisia. And so, of course, given that, class is a hugely important dynamic in this book. And specifically class as it intersects with race, as it intersects with colonialism, right? And so I knew that this book, sometimes it's quite hard, I will say, with these readathons. Sometimes it's hard to know, if you haven't read a book before, whether it's 100% going to fit the prompts, right? Like, you can't just kind of type in a book with impressive architecture and see what comes up. That's why Jesse's recommendation videos every year are so welcome, because I've certainly picked some books from those. But this one I knew was going to deal with some wealthy characters and some class issues, and also with, the colonial resource extraction, which, it would be reductive to call that class politics, but certainly there's class dynamics to it, right? Classist exploitation. And I will just say, I really liked this book. I reviewed this book positively. I liked a lot of the characters. I did say I thought some of the supporting characters I would have liked to maybe have a little bit more time with. But I liked this book. The sequel is better. I thought The Faithless was better than this one. So I'm really, really excited now for book 3. I feel like in The Faithless, there is more nuance and more complexity, and the kind of power differentials involved in the relationships in the book are better elaborated than they were in the first one. In the first one, I thought that there was some really, really, really stark power imbalances that were not always, fully grappled with at times by the people involved in those relationships. And I think the second book really goes there in ways that were very, very effective. So I really liked The Faithless, and I would definitely recommend this series, particularly to folks who might enjoy something like a historical fantasy, who would be interested in kind of fantasy that really explores some really complicated issues of power relations. This series is really good. So that was the fourth prompt. Then we had a bonus group book. And this is, instead of having a prompt, one book is recommended. And the bonus group book is She Would Be King by Wayétu. And this book was incredible. I was not really familiar with this book until this readathon. And part of my reason actually for picking Team Hatshepsut and the prompts that go with it, and not one of the other teams, was that one of the other teams actually had a group book that I had already read. It was a group book that I would eventually reread, but I wanted to have something new and, read an author who I had not read before. I know Wayétu has multiple books, including in nonfiction, but She Would Be King is a novel, and it is set around the founding of the country of Liberia. The author is Liberian, and it has what I would call maybe magical realism aspects to it. It was actually a lot more fantastical than I expected it to be. I knew going in, based on the description, that there were fantasy elements or magical elements, and that it's very much rooted in the history of the founding of Liberia. There was a lot more fantasy than I expected. This book has a lot of things that I like. It had multi-point of view storytelling. So there was kind of 3 characters who were point of view characters. One of them starts out at the beginning of the novel is in Virginia, one in the beginning of the novel is in Jamaica, and one is in, what becomes the country of Liberia from the beginning. And eventually, of course, these perspectives cross paths and converge with each other. And I feel like, as a novel, this is extraordinary. I also feel like I will say, I don't know a ton about the founding of Liberia. I tried to kind of read a little bit, from non-fiction sources to have a bit of the sense of the context, because with a book like this, it's making direct reference to, institutions and things like this that actually existed. And so being able to kind of parse the fiction and the nonfiction in a novel like this, I do want to have some sense of where those distinctions are, right? And I would like to now read more about this. And so if I do the historathon, historical nonfiction readathon, I'm thinking that maybe I could find a book that is not fiction, that is a history of the country of Liberia, and maybe I could incorporate that into the historathon, because that would give me probably a different angle of appreciation for this book, which I thought was extraordinarily well done. 5 stars for She Will Be King. Amazing. This is, one of the reasons I think that this readathon is so fantastic, is that every year that I've done it, I've found a new author who I just want to go out and read more work by them. And the 2 authors that were new to me were Wayétu and also Adamoya Banji. So both of these are authors that I would read more of based on this readathon. I had a lot of fun. If you participate in the readathon, let me know what team you were on and what you read. And if you've read any of these books or these authors, let me know. Please do share. If you read anything fantastic in the context of Black History Month for February, please let me know what that was as well. I do read books that people comment about in the comments, so please do share. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Have a great day.